Okay, well, welcome everybody. It's Sue Searle from Ecology Training UK, and we're here this evening to do a career planning webinar, so I hope I can inspire you. Those of you that don't know me, I'm the Principal Ecologist and Senior at Ecology Training UK. I'm just going to put Megan on mute. And I've got a experience of helping people get into their career, so I'm going to be giving tips. Hopefully that'll be useful for you, and I'll hopefully be able to open up to some questions later on, but I'm just going to go through some things that I think you will find useful to plan your career. So for those of you that don't know me, I was also a nurse and a midwife originally when I left school, and had a bit of a midlife crisis when I was around 40 and decided to retrain. So I went to university and did a degree in biological sciences at Exeter University, and I also did a postgraduate diploma, which is basically a master's without the project, at Bristol in ecology, conservation and habitat management. So I've been an ecologist for 18 years, and I'm now a principal ecologist, and I run Ecology Training UK, which is really the aim of that is to get as many people into ecology as possible. So I'm guessing that's why you're all here, because you want me to help you make a plan. So I'd like to first of all know what sort of level people are at. So I'm thinking that you're either not yet an ecologist, or you're a junior ecologist and you want a bit more inspiration, or you might be an ecologist already. So I'm just going to ask for you to press on the reactions button at the bottom and let me know if you are not yet an ecologist. Let's see how many not yets we've got. Okay, right, we're looking like a majority there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 16. Okay, so 16 not yets. Anybody already an ecologist but still at a junior level? 2. Okay. And then anyone who's kind of on the journey, they're sort of already an ecologist, but they came for some inspiration tonight. Jack. Okay. Right. So the majority of you aren't ecologists yet, so I shall mainly aim the talk at people that are trying to get into ecology, but I hope that it will also be useful for everybody else. So I thought I would start with a little talk about the key skills, and then I'm going to talk about the big three protected species, and let you know about those. And then I'm going to show you a thing that I've used before called a career planner, and I'm going to make it available to everybody if you want a copy of it, so you can create a career plan for yourself. So hopefully you'll enjoy that, and then I'll tell you about the next webinar, which is on the 18th of February, and it's about how to get experience in ecology. So I think all those people that are not yet ecologists would probably like to come to that one, because you would probably want to know how to get experience. Okay. Okay, so the key skills that we think you need to become an ecologist. So the first one that I want to talk about is phase 1 habitat mapping. And habitat mapping, there is another one called UK HAB, which is also a habitat mapping system. So there's also GIS as well. So habitat mapping is actually a really useful thing to have, and it looks really good on your CV. So I think that's something you need to say to yourself, can I do habitat mapping? And if not, I need to learn. Okay, so that's something you could pop down on your list as you know, a skill that you need to look for. And the good news is that Ecology Training UK does do phase 1 habitat mapping courses. We have taught courses, several of them during the year, and we also have an online course, and we've had over 100 people go through the online course now. So most people think you can only learn phase 1 by doing it face to face, but we've had over 100 people go on the phase 1 course so far, and they've actually managed to produce a map, which is the key part of it, and they can send the map to me and I'll have a look at it and say whether there's anything that could have been different, so give you some feedback on it. So you actually go out and practice doing a map as well. So that is one of the key skills. So if that's missing from your CV, then I definitely would put that on your list. Okay, so phase 1 habitat mapping. If you've got that skill already, then make sure you keep it up to date, because obviously it's quite important to be able to do habitat mapping. And when you're going for a job, they might ask you, how many have you done, or what level are you at? So it's something you can do anytime, really. Even during lockdown, you can go and do a habitat map of local areas and have a go at it. And so I think it's something that you can actually have a go at. So the online course is actually me teaching the course exactly as I would if I was doing face-to-face, and I do a classroom session where I explain the alphanumeric system of phase 1, and then I take you out in the field and I show you me making an actual phase 1 map of a site. And then I also take you to a load of different habitats, because that's often a difficult thing to decide on, is the different habitats and what type of woodland you're looking at, or what type of grassland, that sort of thing. So yeah, so it's kind of like I'm there with you, and actually you get to see more habitats than you probably would on the course. So don't be afraid if you're thinking, oh, I don't think I can learn it online. It is possible to learn it online. Okay, so that's the number 1 key skill. The next one is to know how to survey for different protected species, and also to know their ecology and the legislation relating to them. And we also do a course called Surveying for Protected Species, which is a kind of overview course for people that have never done anything like that before. And it covers a number of species like badgers, otters, dormice, bats, reptiles, nesting birds, what else? Water voles, great crested newts. So it gives you a brief overview of how to survey for all of these main protected species. And it also tells you a bit about their ecology, because that kind of ties into when you're doing your phase 1 map, because you'll be looking for habitats of those particular species when you're there. Yeah, so it talks about the habitat that they live in and the times of year that they're active and things like that, and the field signs to look for as well. And then it just gives you the survey techniques. So some surveys you need to have some sort of piece of equipment, and others you just kind of walk around looking for tracks and signs. So surveying for protected species, you can then move on to working by specializing in particular protected species. So once you've got like the overview of the protected species, so we do Surveying for Protected Species course, and that's an online course as well, and that covers all of those different topics. And then once you've done that one, you can actually choose some specialist subjects. So you can maybe do a course on badgers or a course on otters, depending on where you are in the country. I've got a few students at the moment that are up in Scotland, so I'm not advising them to do dormouse training, because they haven't got dormice up there. And equally, if you're down in Cornwall or even down here in Devon, great crested newts aren't a big issue, but bats, dormice and badgers are. So depending on where you are in the country, you will depend on which species you will specialize in. So the third skill that you need, which are what I'm calling the key skills. So we've got the phase 1 habitat mapping, the surveying for protected species, and the third one is report writing and site assessment. So the jargon is preliminary ecological assessment, or PEA. And that's when you go onto a site, you walk around the site, you do a phase 1 habitat map, you note any signs of any protected species, and you take some photographs and things like that, and you assess the site for protected species. So you think, could there be reptiles here, or could there be dormice? You'd also, as part of that, would be doing a desk study, and you would also look at maps and how the site is connected, and if it's very near human habitation or something like that. So it's a good idea to get some training on that, because ultimately you want to put all these skills together and be able to write reports, because that's what an ecological consultant actually produces for the customer. So we do a lot of survey work, but the customer is really only interested in the report. That's the thing that goes to the planner. That's the thing that decides whether this project is going to go ahead. So knowing how to write reports and to do these preliminary ecological appraisals is really important. So you do this preliminary ecological appraisal, and then you need to write a report. And so we do a course. At the moment, there's 2 courses this year, taught courses. It's not available online yet, called PEA and report writing. So it's preliminary ecological appraisal and report writing, and it's a 2-day course where you can come and learn how to do that. But I definitely recommend, if you're not very experienced, to do phase 1 first, and we do actually have that on the day before the PEA course, so you can do like a 3-day course and cover both of those things. So knowing what to write in a report is one of the trade secrets, if you like. It's what we need to know about. So it's having the skill of being able to identify things, and then pulling together all your survey data to make a report that's of a professional standard and gives a clear understanding for the client as to what they can and can't do on site, and what the constraints of the wildlife on site might be, and whether any legislation would be breached from their works. And PEAs usually also involve doing a further survey plan as well. So you can't always tell what species are on site when you do a PEA. For example, you might see long grass, and you might go along in, let's say, February. You go along to a site and you see all this long grass, and you think, that looks like good reptile habitat, but the reptiles are hibernating and you don't see any reptiles, and you often don't see animals when you go to a site and do a PEA. So the idea is that you then need to say, right, we've got to come back in the summer and do a proper survey, a proper reptile survey. So your PEA report will include what further surveys are needed. And then after you've done all your further surveys, you do a final report, which will actually summarize everything that you found and everything that they need to do on site. So it might be they need to avoid certain things, like they need to retain hedgerows and mature trees. They might need to avoid a badger set. They might need to move a badger set. There's all sorts of things that they might need to do on site. They might have to move reptiles or great crested newts. So there's lots of things. And so you can see how, if you have your phase 1, your habitat mapping, and then you know how to survey for protected species, you can then start to think about being able to write a report as well. Okay, so these are what we call the key skills. And some of you have done certificate in ecological consultancy. So do you want to just stick your thumbs up, you guys that have done the certificate before? I can see at least 2 people. Yeah, Laura, Neil, I think you did it. Anybody else? Yeah, so Laura, do you want to just tell us that, so you did certificate in ecological consultancy about 3 years ago, was it? Or do you want to unmute yourself?
Yeah, it was in 2018, so it's 3 years ago.
Okay.
It was a great course. I highly recommend to everyone, because I basically learned everything I need to pursue my career as ecologist. So yeah, it's great.
Okay, that's brilliant. I've actually got a couple of people that are on this year's certificate. So do you want to do a thumbs up, those people that have booked on this year's already? Got Micah, Emma, Rob, Anna, who else? Yeah, so basically those three things that I've just said are the core skills that we do in the core week of the Certificate in Ecological Consultancy. So if anybody wants a complete training to become an ecological consultant, then we are doing the certificates. We already have quite a number booked on it this year, but we still have 10 places if anybody wants to join us in March to study the Certificate in Ecological Consultancy. So those three skills, the phase 1 habitat mapping, the surveying for protected species, so that includes things like tracks and signs, and also the preliminary ecological appraisal and report writing are what we put into the first week of the certificate course, so that you've got those foundations ready. So we've also got a couple of other key skills I'm just going to mention, and one of them is driving. And the reason why I'm saying that is because there's been a couple of posts up on some of the Facebook pages saying, I can't drive yet, but I want to be an ecologist. And I've had people apply for jobs as well, because in the past I've employed many people. And I'm afraid if you can't drive, you're going to really struggle. So I think if you're thinking about doing your career goals and you can't drive, then it's really important to focus on that, because you really can't get to sites without being able to drive. The sites are actually, remote usually, and they're definitely not accessible by public transport. You often have to take equipment with you. So it's a good idea to actually, learn how to drive, basically. And I saw on a Facebook group the other day that somebody was saying, could I ask my employer to pay me to learn how to learn to drive? And I was like, I wouldn't if I was hiring somebody. I mean, I've hired a lot of people in the past, and I had one girl that couldn't drive for a bit, and she'd been with me for 10 years and she developed epilepsy. And I couldn't say to her, well, I can't have you working here anymore just because you can't drive. But what she had to do was get people from her community to take her to work, to sites, because economically we can't send two people out just to drive somebody to somewhere. If you need to do a survey, you need to be able to get there. So basically driving is a key skill, and I would never hire anyone who can't drive. So, this person on Facebook, she was saying, oh, I think the employer could, give me an education budget to learn how to drive. And I was like, well, it's like saying maybe they could give me an education budget to pay for my degree as well. It's a key skill. You absolutely need to have a relevant degree or experience and some training, and driving. Okay, that's a key skill. And the other key skill, which I always sort of make sure I get all the certificate students for sure to do, is to learn botany. So if you're trying to do phase 1 mapping, then that's really habitats, and habitats are made up of plants. And if you don't know the plants, then you can't really map habitats very well. So if you're right at the beginning of your career planning, then make sure you can drive and make sure you can do botany. So we do beginners botany courses. We've got some talk courses in the summer in some fantastic sites where you can see all sorts of interesting things. And we also do beginners botany online as well, but that's not available until May, only because I don't want people doing beginners botany at this time of the year. I want them to do it when there's flowers. So I'm not releasing that one until May. I want to make sure all the leaves are out on the trees and there's loads of flowers to look at. So look out for that one if you are totally rubbish at botany, because it's really, really important to be able to identify plants. Okay, so those are what I call the key skills. There's the three main key skills. There's the phase 1 habitat mapping, the surveying for protected species, and the preliminary ecological appraisal and report writing. And actually the last one, the preliminary ecological appraisal and report writing, is often the last thing that a trainee ecologist learns. So the first thing they will learn is how to do the phase 1 habitat mapping and how to look for protected species, and then also how to do the surveys. So usually a junior ecologist will be doing things like reptile, newts, dormice, bird surveys, those sorts of things, and maybe botanical surveys if they can prove that they're good enough at botany. And then the report writing sort of comes later. And what we find with our trainees is that we get the trainees to help us with the report by maybe doing the site description, maybe putting together the desk study, maybe doing the phase 1 map, or writing our findings and things like that. And then the senior staff will come in and write the conclusions and the recommendations and things like that. And that way the student or the junior ecologist can learn from that person. So it's usually something that you learn on the job, but you can certainly learn it. I mean, I learned it before I started my ecology consultancy from my master's degree. And so it is something you can learn before you start the job, and it's certainly useful if you can demonstrate that you can do that. Okay, I'm just going to open up to questions about that because I'm talking too much and I've still got a couple more things that I can talk about, but I wondered if anyone's got any questions about the key skills. So if you want to maybe put your hand up or show yourself or in some way. Nobody got any questions? Okay, I'll carry on then. Okay, are there any particular types of plants in particular worth learning? Well, you usually start with flowering plants and trees. Trees are pretty easy to identify, not this time of the year though. So wait for sort of May to October time to do your tree ID. But I worked for a couple of years when I was doing my bat training with somebody, and we're going to put the questions in the chat. I'd rather have live questions actually. So anyone that's asking me questions on the chat, you can ask me a live question in a minute. But anyway, I was working with this bat worker, and she was one of the top bat workers in the UK, and she didn't know any plants at all. And so when she was trying to describe a bat roost in a tree, she had no idea what sort of tree it was. So she couldn't tell you if it was an oak tree or an ash tree, and she couldn't tell you if you were on an important grassland or something like that. So yeah, so it was quite shocking really to think that. So if you want to specialize in bats and you don't want to learn any plants, then you could possibly get away with that, but you're not really limiting your job opportunities. So I think it's much better to be have an overview. Okay, so quite a few of you have actually asked me some questions. Could we possibly get you to ask them out loud so we can so you can unmute yourself? Let me see who's asked a question. Right, so let's go back here in a second. So Jenny, you asked, are there any particular types of plants in particular worth learning? Yeah, so I've just said about trees, but also really all the flowering plants. I would try and do a few grasses as well. And things like ferns aren't that difficult, but the flowering plants really, because a lot of the plants are indicator species of a particular type of habitat. So if you don't know the plants, then you can't necessarily identify the plants. So really flowering plants and trees to start off with. For phase 1 mapping, you can do a traditional pen and paper method where you have like a base map and you colour the map in with coloured crayons, or you can digitally colour it in, or you can do it on GIS. So it depends on what you've got available. I usually do mine digitally because it looks more professional. I don't think I'd do a hand coloured one in a professional report. And actually, on the phase 1 course, I do show you how to do a digital map. So yeah, so check that out. Is there a good field guide for UK plants? If you do beginners botany, I recommend the Collins Pocket Guide. Have I got it here? It's a little to the wildflowers of Britain and Northern Europe by Fitter and Blaney. And that one's really good for beginners. There's also the Collins Collins Photographic Guide of Wildflowers. So that one's quite good as well. It's got a little key at the beginning with pictures of plants. So the flowers are really key identification features. And if you're learning botany, then start with the flowers, start with flowering plants that are actually in flower. And you can do things like count the petals, look at the size of the flower, the shape of the flower, and all those sorts of things. And those 2 books that I've just mentioned actually have a little key, so you can say, oh, it's a 3-petaled flower that looks like that, and then it will list all the plants that have a flower like that. Yeah, are there any good starter books for ID plants? So I've just mentioned those 2. What's the difference between PEA and EIA? So a PEA is a preliminary ecological appraisal, and that is when you actually go to a site for the first time and appraise it and see what you think is there, what further surveys need to be done. And EIA is an environmental impact assessment, and you can only assess the environmental impact of a site once you've done the PEA and all the further surveys, and you know exactly what is on site because you've done your bat surveys and your reptile surveys and things like that. So the EIA is a huge piece of work, and the ecology is just a chapter of it. So the environmental impact assessment will cover other things like water pollution, noise, visual impact, traffic studies, and all sorts of things like that. And the ecology is just a part of that. Okay, there is another thing called an ECIA, which is the ecological impact assessment, which is just the ecology part of it, and that's something that you'll do when you're much more experienced. I think from most of the people that are in this session now, it's not something that you would get involved in anytime soon, but just to be aware that it is something that happens, particularly on bigger sites or infrastructure projects where they need to assess the impact on the environment of that project before it's allowed to go ahead. So we've got a question from Megan. Can I just check, when you say habitat mapping, do you mean when you use a code and associated colour to label different habitat types and then input it into GIS? Yes, phase 1 is a mapping system. I think I've got the phase 1 book here. If I just hold it up. Handbook for, what does it say? Handbook for phase 1 habitat survey by JNCC. You can actually get this book online as a PDF. So have a look at that, and then that is the system. And then you can either make it as a hand-coloured map or as a digitally coloured map, or you can put it onto GIS if you have GIS. So it's basically a colour and alphanumeric code that you use, and you'll know then which habitat it is that you're using, and you have to determine it from this book and use the correct habitat. Okay, so I've answered all those questions. Great. So can I just ask, have I muted everybody so that nobody can actually speak? Can somebody try unmuting themselves and see if they can? Oh, yes. You can, okay.
Yep.
Right, so you can speak if you want to. Right, good. Okay, so that's the key skills. So when you're doing your career planning, you need to make sure that you can try to get some experience with that. And I think particularly botany and phase 1 and surveying for protected species are things that is really good to be aware of and to start to practice. And if you're looking for jobs and you're not quite there yet. And then I'm just going to talk about what I call the big three. So the big three are the three main survey licenses that you go for when you're training to be an ecologist. And when I started as an ecologist, I started as a junior, even though I was working for myself. So I was at that level, and every time I got stuck with any surveys or any information I didn't know or couldn't work out for myself, I would hire another ecologist and work with another ecologist. So I was quite lucky that I had quite a number of friends that were willing to do that for me. But typically you would get a junior job or an assistant ecologist job, and then you would go out with the more senior staff and, you know, learn by osmosis basically from them. But one of the things that you need to do is start to work towards your survey licenses. And I don't know if you even know what they are. I think some of you probably do, but others might not. So basically, if I want to do a survey of a building and I think it's got bats in it, I need to have a survey license. And it's issued by Natural England or the Welsh and Scottish equivalent. And basically it gives me the legal right, if you like, to go and disturb a bat whilst doing a survey. And to get a license, you need to have survey experience. You need to have 2 people that also have a license to sign you off to say that you're competent. And you do need to get a fair bit of experience, especially with the bats. But once you have a license, there are a number of people that I know, for example, that have bat licenses. So they basically got massively into bats. They did their all sorts of things with the bat group, and, you know, lots of work of you know, doing bat work and what have you. And they ended up getting a license. And you can get a bat license even if you haven't got a relevant degree or have never worked as an ecologist. So I know bat workers that are, well, the one that I spoke about just now, who couldn't identify any trees, she was a college lecturer. I also know a lawyer, a postman, a postwoman, and various other people that have a bat license that have never done any formal ecology training, haven't got relevant degree, but have a bat license and can work as professional bat workers. So this is one way of getting in if you haven't got a relevant degree for your career plan. And I know some people are struggling with that side of things and think that they can't get in, but you can. There are ways that you can become an ecologist, and eventually, you know, if you just keep going and keep practicing, then you will actually get enough experience to get a job at some point, whether you've got a degree or not. Okay, so the big 3 licenses to work towards are bats, great crested newts, and dormice. Okay, those are the 3 that most people are going for who are ecologists. So I'll go through that again. It's bats, great crested newts, and dormice. And the great crested newt and dormice ones are quite easy to get. You can usually get them within a survey season, so sort of April to October type of time. You can actually get your dormouse license if you can get out with somebody who's a dormouse worker, and they, you know, they can take you out and give you some experience. The great crested newt survey license is also reasonably easy to get, but the survey season is earlier, so it's kind of nowish until about June. So you've only got a few months that you can actually do your survey practice. So you have to get your act together and make sure you go out with people that have a license and try and get some great crested newt experience. So sometimes it will take a couple of years because you've only got these couple of windows of opportunity to do some survey work with licensed people. And then bats is the most difficult one to get. And I've actually had students in the classroom with me saying, it's impossible to get a bat license. And I was going, well, hardly, there's quite a lot of us out there. But with a bat license, you actually have to be able to demonstrate competence. And one of the ways you have to demonstrate competence is to have 100 or more hours survey experience. And most surveys are only 2 hours, so that's about 50 surveys. Okay, so if you can get your experience whilst working and getting paid for it, great. If you can't, like me, I don't think I got paid for any of mine when I was learning before I got my bat license. So I know if you know a bit about bats, you can offer your services now to other people that are working with bats and go and do bat surveys. So I've got a number of subcontractors that I use, and some of them are, you know, just interested in bats. Others want to be ecologists, and they come out and they get their survey experience, and they're quite good. But they wouldn't be able to write the reports and things like that at that stage, but they're perfectly capable of holding a bat detector and writing down results and things like that. Yeah, so the bat one, it actually took me three survey seasons to get my bat license. I had 3 summers basically before I had enough experience to get my bat license. But there are people that have got bat licenses that just get a job in ecology consultancy, even if they you know, haven't got any other experience, because there really is a shortage of bat workers. One year on my certificate course, I had a guy who was actually in the same course as this girl that said it's impossible to get a bat license, and he actually got his in 1 year. And that's actually going out as many times as he could. So over the period sort of April to September, end of September, if you can go out pretty much every night, you could potentially get your bat license in 1 year. But I would let yourself off the pressure of that, really, because it's not much fun going out every single night. It's very tiring, especially if you're working. And just say to yourself, yeah, I quite like the idea of doing my bat license, and I'm going to, you know, start working towards it, and it might take me 2 or 3 years to get it, but it'll be worth it. And the thing is, it's really worth just plodding along with it and just keep working towards it. And you also need to log your bat work as well. We do have a template for a bat log if you want to record any bat work that you do. So typically the bat work that juniors or non-professionals do are emergent surveys and activity surveys, and it doesn't take much training for you to be able to do those. And then you need to log them all so that you can actually count up the number of hours, and you have to give your log to the person that's assessing you to sign you off at the end. Yeah, so those are the big 3. There are some other licenses you can get. For example, there's barn owl, there's the rare snakes and lizards, so you can get a sand lizard and a smooth snake license. You can also get white-clawed crayfish license. There's some species that are fully protected that you don't need a license for, and that is badgers and otters, because it's felt that the survey methods that we use are non-disturbing. So you don't need to try working towards licenses for those 2 species. Okay, so I'm going to open up for any questions. You can either say them or type them on the big 3 and getting licenses. So is there anything you don't understand about licenses? Obviously, it's quite a big subject, and I probably will do a separate webinar on this at some point. Any questions about licenses?
Apart from surveying, what else is very important to know about bats? Let's say if you're applying for bat license, do you have to be competent in bat ID, and how can you prove that you know?
Well, you have to have 2 licensed bat workers have to sign you off. So if it's one person that you're working with, then you have to find another person, and it might be somebody from the bat group or something like that. So this is where it's important to, like, go out with lots of different people, not just the same people, because otherwise you'll end up not having any signatories. But those people that you go out with, they will have an idea of how you get your experience, of what experience you've got and what you know. And then usually you get quizzed by the person that's signing you off. So I was grilled for about 2 hours when I did my bat license. To be sure that I knew everything about all the ecology and the behaviours and the types of roosts and the legislation and all sorts of things like that. So there's an awful lot that you need to know. And there is a training programme that Bat Conservation Trust has come up with, and it basically lists all the things that you need to know to be able to become a bat worker. And just to let you know, with bats, not with great crested newts and dormice, but with bats, there are 4 levels of license. So your first license that you get is a level 1, and that one is just basically allows you to do a survey. And then level 2, you can handle bats, do surveys, and also use endoscopes. And then level 3, you can use mist nets, and level 4, you can use harp traps. So there's like different levels that you can do. I've got all those levels. And every time you want to go up a level, you have to be signed off by a bat worker as well. So it's basically the person that's been taking you out knows what you know. And then they might ask you a load of questions. Just to let you know, I do actually do a course called Revise and Assess. So if you've got to the point where you've done 100 hours of bat work, then I do a course where I will see what you know about bats, take you out on some visits, and then sign you off. And that's assuming that you have your other signatory as well. It was a bit tricky to do it last year because we couldn't do the site visits, and I'm not sure how it's going to work this year either, but we will try and get that done. It is important to do some bat courses. We have a number of bat courses online. We've got 7 actually online courses, and we've also got the 2-day bat ecology and surveying course, which is a taught course. And we also have bats and development, which is once you've got your bat license and you're giving advice about bats, you need to know how to assess for the impacts, what mitigation you can put in place, and how you work with developers. And there's a further licensing process for developments as well. So you can learn all about that in bats and development. Does that answer?
Thank you. Yeah, that was good. Because I wasn't sure how it works and who is able to assess. So yeah, that makes sense now. Thank you.
Okay. And actually Natural England doesn't test you in any way. They actually expect those people that sign you off to have done that, and they're verifying that you're competent to be a bat worker. Okay. Benjamin, you have a question?
Hi, yeah. Good evening, Susan.
Hiya.
Hi. I come from Guernsey in the Channel Islands. I was just wondering if these licenses were actually valid over here, if you had any experience whether the licenses worked.
Have you got a license over there then?
I haven't got anything so far. I'm just private, but yeah, I'd like to.
No, sadly not.
Sorry, you have no experience in, or they don't?
No, they don't.
Okay.
For example, I've got a Welsh bat license and an English bat license, and there's 2 different licenses, and I had to be signed off by bat workers from each of the countries. In fact, that's not quite true because the rules have changed a bit since then. So previously, if you had one license, I had the English one, and I just wrote to the Welsh the Welsh licensing team and said, I've got an English license, can I have a Welsh one? And they said, yeah, go on then. And they just basically gave it to me. And then they started actually wanting people to be signed off by 2 people like they do in England as well. So I think you'd probably have to be signed off. So if you work somewhere like some of my students work in, let's say, the border, like Hereford or somewhere like that, where you're likely to work in Wales and England at the same time, I would suggest to you that if you are working, likely to be working in one of the other countries as well, that you actually get the signatory people to sign both license applications at the same time and apply for both at the same time.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions about licensing?
I assume it's similar for Scotland as well, because I'm quite close to the Scottish border. So would it be, when I get an English one, I'd also have to look into the Scottish license?
Yeah, if you're going to hassle somebody to sign your license, then you might as well get them to sign 2 forms at the same time. Because if they're willing to do...
Can they do that? So can someone work in England also say you can work in Scotland, or does it like have to be a Scottish back group?
They would have to have a Scottish back license.
Okay, right, okay.
You could ask SNH if they would accept licensed back worker. They might do. I'm not sure actually right now. But I've signed off people for Welsh back licenses with my Welsh back license number. Whether they would allow that, I think you just need to check with the licensing authority.
Yeah, it's a similar thing, but anyway, it's good to know. Thank you.
If it's somebody that's working in the border areas where they're likely to be working in both, then they've probably got both licenses. So yeah. But check first.
Yeah, makes sense. Thank you.
Okay. Kaylee, have you got a question?
Hi, yes. I've noticed now, well, for the last few years already, there's been increased prevalence of beavers in the UK. And I'm just wondering whether that's been matched with an increased demand for people with beaver licenses, and whether that would be worth investing in, and if it's, relatively easy, or if it's quite difficult, like the bats.
It's the same as it is with badgers and otters. I don't think that the way you survey for a beaver is disturbing, unless you're going to poke around in their burrows or lodges and stuff like that. So if you're just going along a riverbank looking for tracks and signs and lodges and things like that, you don't need a license for that.
Oh, okay.
It's non-disturbing. So it's the same with a badger set. You can actually stand on a badger set and you're not breaking the law, as long as you're not disturbing the badger inside the set. So if you start digging it up or putting things down into the hole or anything like that, then you would need to have a license for that. But if you're just looking at it and mapping it, for example, how many holes are active or something like that, then you don't need a license. And the same for otters. You can survey a riverbank for otter spraint. That's non-disturbing. The only thing that would be disturbing is if you're actually going to put something into a holt, like an endoscope or something like that. So we don't have licenses for those. Just out of interest, we do individual species on ecology and surveying for a lot of the protected species. So we have a badger ecology and surveying, we have bat ecology and surveying, we have otters, we have beavers, we have great crested newts, we have dormouse. So we have courses on all of those where you can start to learn about these species and then learn about how to get more experience and how to get licenses and all that sort of thing. So remember the big 3: bats, great crested newts and dormice. If you're up in Scotland, then maybe do bats, otters and badgers or something like that. You don't need to do licenses for badgers, but otters are, and you don't for otters either, but learn about your local species, because there are some species that don't occur in Scotland. So you might want to find some other species to deal with instead. Okay, so is that all the questions about licenses? So when we're talking about planning our goals, and I'm going to get onto the actual goal setting bit in a minute, you need to bear in mind all of these key skills, the big 3, because those are the things that you're going to be putting into your plan. Okay, so I've also just sort of put a note here about mentioning about getting experience, and I'm actually going to do a webinar on the 18th of February at 7 o'clock on how to get experience as an ecologist or in ecology. So that is a really key part of getting your CV up to scratch to get people to hire you. And there are ways that you can get experience, and lots of different ways that you can get experience, including things like joining the bat group or your local mammal group, or joining in with national surveys like Bat Conservation Trust and National Amphibian and Reptile Recording Scheme, and all sorts of organisations like that are doing surveys that you can get involved in as amateurs. And you can also contact your local consultancies to ask for experience as well, and often they'll hire subcontractors to do reptile surveys or bat surveys and things like that. So it's worth actually getting in touch with your local consultancies and seeing if you can start to build a relationship with them. And I think it's good if you can demonstrate that you've actually got a bit of training behind you, because, for example, if someone says, oh, can I come and do some bat work with you? And I say, well, what have you done with bats? Oh, I haven't done anything. So I said, so do you know how many species of bats there are? No. Do you know what their legal protection is? No. Do you know anything about their ecology at all? No. So I'm like, oh no. I don't really want to spend my time trying to teach someone from scratch all about something that I think they could maybe go on a short course, just learn all that stuff, and then offer their services and say, I've done a bat course, I'm really interested in taking this further, and I'd like to get some survey experience. And that's much better, because you're already singing from the same hymn sheet. You know how many species there are, you know about their ecology, about sound, about how they make sound and echolocation, what sort of habitats they live in, the different species requirements and all those things. So get a bit of training, I would say, before you offer yourself for giving making yourself available, shall I say, for some experience with consultancies, and a lot of them are very pleased to help out. And this guy I was saying earlier that got his bat license in a year, he was just super friendly and super helpful, and he was just a joy to work with. And I think if you can say to yourself, right, I'm going to be a joy to work with, and be that person that people will think of first because they really like you and they want to work with you. This woman that said it was impossible to get a bat license was basically moaning, complaining, thought that everybody owed her something and they should help her and all this sort of thing. And I said, the way round is, how can you help them? How can you help the consultants? How can you take the pressure off in the busy season? I'm available to help with bat surveys, and I know a little bit about bats, and I'd like to get some experience and try and be as helpful and as flexible as possible. Also, if you're trying to get experience with bat work or any survey work, is not to let people down. So a couple of years ago, I had a student who 2 days before the bat survey that she was booked in for, I said, are you still okay for Thursday night? And she said, oh, I can't make it after all. And I was like, oh. So it was a survey where I needed 6 people, and with one missing, I couldn't do the survey. I only had 2 days to try and find a bat worker, and I couldn't find one because everybody had been booked up weeks before. And so basically we had to cancel the survey. We had to explain it to the client. We had to reschedule the survey. We had to re-find all the surveyors again, even though a lot of them get booked up really quickly. And if you're super helpful and available, don't let people down, you will get asked to come back, and so you'll soon build up your experience. It's just try to be as helpful as possible, really. And don't forget to log your bat experience. So basically, I can let you have a bat log if you want to. It's just a spreadsheet, and it just has like the date of your survey, the type of survey you did, who you went with, what you found, what you learned, and you just keep a log of everything that you do so you can add up those hours. Okay, so planning your career. I've got a thing called a career planner, and I'm just going to share my screen. And this is a document that I can let you have a copy of if you want to. I'll find a way to put a link on it on our webinar page. So can you see that? Can somebody tell me if you can see that? Because I can't tell.
I'm good.
Okay, great. Okay, so it's this it's a piece of paper basically with a life plan on it. Okay, or you can call it a career planner. It's just it's a Word document, so you can do whatever you want. And basically, it's a way of planning out or mapping out your career. And I found this very, very useful, and you can use it for other things as well. So, for example, this one's called a life planner. So it might be in 5 years' time, I would like to own a house, have my own horse, have, you know, ride a Ferrari, whatever, have a bat license. And you can actually like include all the life goals that you want as well as your career goals. Okay, and I think sometimes people you know, plan their careers quite a lot, but they don't really plan their lives very much. A good example is people spend more time planning their wedding than their marriage. So, you know, they'll spend ages planning this one day. The same with having a baby. They plan all this having the baby and then don't actually plan how they're going to bring the child up. So I think setting goals is something that most people don't do. So there's this sort of 90% of people don't set goals and 10% do, and it's those 10% that are the most successful in life. So it's definitely worth thinking about stepping over to the 10%. If you're already a goal setter, then that's great, and do continue doing it. And I'll hopefully give you some inspiration in this last half an hour about what to put into this. So basically you decide where you're going to be in 5 years' time, and then you chunk it down right down to the next 90 days. But the thing that you start with is some assumptions that you make. So I'll just read the instructions here. It says, write down your aim for where you want to be in 5 years' time, and write it in the first section under actions and aims. Write down your current situation and assumptions made. Okay, so here we've got your current situation. So it might be something like, I'm currently working in a pet shop, and I've got a relevant degree, but I'm not in the role that I would like to be, and that's my current situation. And then assumptions made would be something like, I'll give you an example in a minute, and I'll show you a filled out one. It might be something like, well, I'm perfectly capable of being an ecologist. I'm clever enough, I'm motivated enough, I'm interested enough. Those are assumptions that you can make, that it is possible for you to become an ecologist. So that's what you start with, and then you just start to fill this in, basically. So you put in your milestones, the steps that you get to. So if you start from junior or assistant ecologist this survey season, in 5 years' time, you should be a senior ecologist. So you could write in here, senior ecologist. Okay. It took me about 5 years to become a senior ecologist, and about 8 or 9 years to become a principal ecologist, maybe 10 years, something like that. So here it says, then think of the milestones that you would expect to be at for each of the timescales given, and write them down. So it'll be things like, I'll show you an example in a second. It'll be things like, how many plants do you know how to identify? What licenses would you have got by this point, and things like that. So you write them down, and what can you do in the next 90 days to start your journey? You need to start now, enjoy the process, take action, and review every 90 days. So you need to basically be working towards this. Now, one of the most important things about this 5-year plan is to give it an actual date, because otherwise it's always your 5-year plan and you never actually get there. And it's a psychological thing, because you say, I've got a 5-year plan. In 5 years, I'm going to have a house, or I'm going to, live in Barbados or something like that, whatever it is that you want to be doing in 5 years' time. But, if you always call it your 5-year plan, by the end of this year, it should be your 4-year plan. And by the end of next year, it should be your 3-year plan. Okay. But a lot of people keep it as their 5-year plan, and that's how it stays as a dream rather than a goal. Okay. So it's really important to make a goal time limited. Okay, so when you put your 5 years here, you'd actually put a date. So let's say 1st of January 2026 is when I will have achieved all of these things. So you'll write them in there. Okay, and also I've got here area of life. So if it's a life planner, you could do area of life. It could be something like fitness planner, or I don't know, a wealth planner, or you know, lots of different topics that you can do, and you can do a plan for each one if you want to. So the key thing is, you know where you're going, okay, your 5-year plan, and you just need to decide what you need to do in the next 90 days. So that's basically the next 3 months. So I'm going to just show you, I'm going to stop sharing because I think I need to select my other document. Okay, so here's one that's actually an example, and so this is career ecological consultancy. So I've got here, in 5 years' time, I'll be a senior ecologist earning 40,000 a year, expert in bats, level 4 license, expert botanist, ornithologist, herp worker. If you don't know what a herp worker is, it's to do with amphibians and reptiles, and mammalogist, expert in badgers with extensive experience of badger work, competent in all aspects of ecological consultancy, including botany, herps, birds, phase 1, several staff under me, including trainees, attend 2 conferences in that year. Okay, so that's where we're aiming for, and I'll go back down here to the assumptions. I am intelligent, hardworking, committed and enthusiastic. I have every reason to succeed. I love ecology and I'm really interested in wildlife. And current situation, this is just an example, obviously. I have done a degree and have just secured my first job as a training ecologist, but have no experience. I have poor ID skills, especially plants. Okay, so when you're thinking about your current situation, it depends on what you come in with. So some of my certificate students, for example, are really good birders or really good botanists, but they don't know much about the other protected species and things like that. So you could then, you know, make your summary of where you're at now and what sort of skills you would like to get. So in the next 90 days, with these assumptions and this current situation, it's some of the things that you need to do in the next 90 days. So list the skills I need. So I've already been talking quite a bit for the first hour on the skills that you need to get. Book training on phase 1 habitat and surveying for protected species. Carry out as many surveys as possible for a variety of species: bats, dormouse, badgers, great crested newts, reptiles. Phase 1. Learn 20 trees and 60 plants. That's 2 every 3 days. Join local bat group and go to events. Read the phase 1 handbook. Okay, so there's your jobs for the next 3 months. So actually, I think that would probably be some of those things might take 3 months. Some of them might take 3 minutes or 5 minutes or 10 minutes. Okay, so I think you could actually chunk this down a little bit more and make it a bit more precise. So with then going up to 6 months. So once you've done your 3 months here, the next 3 months, learn 90 more plants, 1 a day, and 10 more trees. Go out at least once a week outside work doing bat work. Great crested newt and dormouse surveys ×6. Start to read the bat workers manual. Conservation law, health and safety, bat ecology and surveying. Do a bat ecology course. Learn to do bat sound analysis. Start writing reports. Do simple surveys on my own. Okay, so this person obviously wants to get their bat license and they want to be level 4 by the time in 5 years' time. So they're really going for it. Okay. So then in 9 months, learn 100 more plants and 10 more trees. Go out on 1 badger job and discuss with colleagues. Learn badger ecology and field signs. Read Ernest Neal. There's a badger book by Ernest Neal, which is really good. And do a course. Great crested newt and dormouse surveys ×6. Read Great Crested Newt and Dormouse Conservation Handbooks. Do dormouse course. Read 2 bat books. The ID and ecology ones, writing reports to include advice. Now, I don't know if you're thinking, how will I know what to put in here, these milestones? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this available as well as a bit of a map, as just an example. But what you'll find is when you get a little bit of training, that'll trigger off your knowledge, and you'll know, I now know what I need to do to get my bat license, for example. I now know what I need to do to get my dormouse license. I've done my beginner's botany now. I now know how to identify plants. I can set myself some targets on the plants. So I think training is really important here. And without training, I think you would find this quite challenging. And the training that I provide anyway is very, very much geared to unlocking trade secrets for people and making it much more accessible for people. So I hope that, you know, it inspires you to actually get some training as well over the next months and years. And, you know, I would say do at least 2 or 3 courses a year. And if you want to become a certified, like an ecologist that's registered with our professional body, which is CIEM, which is the Chartered Institute of Ecologists and Environmental Managers, then they do expect you to do 20 hours of training per year. So it's something that you're going to have to get into the habit of if you want to be a member of CIEM, is to actually make sure you do training every year anyway, to keep your quality of work up. Okay, so I'll just so here we've got, after a year, promoted to assistant ecologist, involved in the badger license, gaining bat experience, Great Crested Newt license, Great Crested Newt course. I know 250 plants, 30 trees, 5 grasses. I've got my Dormouse and Great Crested Newt license, going out on scoping surveys unaccompanied, writing my own reports, invasive species course, bat conference. So when conferences are happening, which they're not really at the moment, but I'm sure they'll get so desperate to do conferences, they'll start doing them online. And I know some organisations are. Definitely worth going to conferences. You can learn so much in a couple of days on a conference. I mean, I've been to the bat conferences for decades. It's just really, really good. And I went to a Dormouse conference, not last year because it wasn't on, but the year before. And there was about 200 and I can't remember if it was 250. There was a lot of people in the room anyway, all just wanting to learn about dormice, believe it or not. And I'd say about a third of the room had been through my Dormouse course. Literally people were coming up to me and going, oh, we did the Dormouse course with you, and now we're really into dormice and we love dormice, and now we come to conferences and stuff like that. I'm an expert in dormice. So that's how you get started, get some training behind you, and then that triggers you off to go and do some experience and get your license and that sort of thing. So here we've got year 2, gain level 1 bat license, starting to do some badger licenses, 500 plants, so you're pretty much a botanist by now. Here in 3 years you've got promoted to ecologist, know most plants, trees, common grasses, ferns, know most birds. You're doing a bird song course, start doing European protected species licenses, although they're not called that anymore because of we're not in Europe anymore. Level 2 license for bats, licenses for dormice and great crested newts, know enough plants to ID most flowering plants, trees, common grasses. And then 4 years you'll still be an ecologist, but you'll have your level 3 bat license. You'll be training in different aspects of botany, so grasses, sedges, mosses, rushes and water plants. So that's not really the sort of standard flowering plants and trees. You're going to start getting a bit more specialised then. Consolidating European protected species licenses and BREEAM experiences, and then right up to being a senior ecologist, which we mentioned earlier. So that's kind of an example of a pathway that you could take. And I think it's really important to kind of put some lines in the sand and just say, right, where do I want to go? What am I doing now? And try and work out what some of these steps are. And I think looking at this, you would find that helpful to be able to map out. And you might think, well, I can only learn 50 plants in a year, and you don't really know until you try how many you can do. But I think it's a good idea to, you know, do your botany course, make a start on your botany, and then once you start to go, it kind of rolls. So has anybody done beginner's botany that would like to say how they got on with it? Did you do it, Laura? Hello?
Yes, I did beginner's botany, and I'm actually really interested now in plants, so I pursued learning further, and I did courses on grasses, sedges, and rushes. So it's you start, and then it carries you away. You want to learn more and more.
It gets easier, yeah. Okay, so I've got a couple of questions that I missed earlier. How long is your training experience valid for? Like, if we did something X years ago, does it still count? I think Natural England and the others like to see some recent experience, but it does take a few years to get experience, and I think it needs to go on your log, even if it's a few years ago, but try and get some recent experience as well. And then Danny's asked, CIEM suggests you do an accredited degree and they suggest the universities to go to, but that's 4 years without experience. Which pathway do you think is best? Well, not everybody goes to university. So, like, for example, Mike Woods, who wrote the Dormouse Conservation Handbook, he did go to university. I think he did something like British history or something like that. You know, I think sometimes you can just get away with not doing a degree, and I'm not advocating that. If you can possibly do a good degree, it will always make it a lot easier. If you've already got one, then great, you can build on that. If you haven't got one, you're going to have a bit of an uphill struggle to demonstrate your skills and knowledge. And we do bespoke training advice, like, you know, if you want to know what's the best way to move forward in your individual case, if you tell me, you know, what you're up to and what you're aiming for, then I can give you a career plan. So we actually had a girl today, and I don't know if she's here tonight. Are you here tonight? Emily that I was talking to today. I can't remember if you're here tonight. Anyway, she's working in a hospital in a medical role, and she really, really wants to be an ecologist. And so I suggested that she did the phase 1 habitat mapping and also the surveying for protected species, and then start working on bats, basically. And if you can get bat experience and start working on bats, because she's going to be working in her role for the foreseeable future. But if she can work towards her bat license and get a bat license, then you're starting to get quite a long way towards it. I also recommend to people that I have got people on my certificate course who have got some experience of working with ecologists or working in the environmental sector or working as arboriculturalists or maybe land managers. Like, I had a ranger from the National Trust on certificate last year. And because they hadn't got a relevant degree, I asked them to do our Introduction to Ecology course, which is actually a training to learn all the fundamental principles of ecology, so that if I start talking about biomes and biotic factors and things like that, you know what I'm talking about. And so I think there is a way to get into ecology if you just keep going, and there's loads you can do while you're keeping going, if you see what I mean. So you can be doing surveys, you can be, you know, working towards your licenses and things like that, and building up an expertise. The longer you get experience for, the more experienced and confident you'll be anyway. I remember, though, this guy, he was called Mike Woods, and he who had the history degree, when we sat in conferences, he had no idea what a mitochondria was, or there were certain things he'd never heard of because he'd never done biology or anything like that. So he didn't sort of understand the genetic side of things and things like that. So I think, you know, the introduction to ecology is a really good foundation for people that have absolutely no ecology knowledge or biological training at all. So CIM suggests that you do an accredited degree, and they suggest the universities to go to. I think CIM shouldn't tell you what degree to do. It's up to you. I mean, I went to university in Exeter and did biological sciences because at the time I had 2 fairly young children, not super young, but, you know, they could get themselves to school. But it was, you know, I went to Exeter University because I lived in Exeter and I wanted something that was vaguely relevant to what I wanted to do. So if that university hadn't have been on CIM's list, it wouldn't have made any difference to me. You know, I think a degree is a degree, and I think there are some degrees that are more relevant to ecology and to this career, but then there's, you know, there's others on the periphery that might not be so suitable. So if you've got an idea of going to university, if you've got the possibility to go to university, then I would. We've got quite a number of people that have done open university degrees, for example, and they're doing very well. They've managed to get jobs. And some people actually go straight into master's degrees as well. So some people think that you have to have a first degree to be able to go into a master's degree, but that's not true. If you can show some sort of competence, then you can go straight into a master's. So, you know, there might be a relevant master's that you can do. Yeah. Does that answer your question, Danny? Or so basically, yeah. Oh, the other thing is, if you do go to university, I mean, some of you might still be at university, I'm not sure, but when you're at university, you're only actually there for 6 months. If you actually then count up all your holidays and that sort of thing. And I think one of the big mistakes that people make is to see those as holidays. My daughter actually did a degree in ecology, and every single holiday she was out doing survey work. And she actually went and worked for the RSPB for the summers and worked on their reserves, because you can go and do, you know, a whole summer working with the RSPB on a fantastic reserve and do loads of different things, survey work and habitat management and all sorts of things like that. And she actually managed to get a load of experience while she was at university. So just because you're at university doesn't mean to say you can't do anything else. Same with if you're working full time, you can still join in with your back group events, you can still join in with survey work and do all sorts of things like that. So, you know, don't kind of do one thing at a time. try and keep broad, try and keep going with experience and surveying as much as you can. Does that answer your question, Danny? Is she still there? Okay, and I've got another question. What is EPSL and BREEAM, please? EPSL is European Protected Species License, and that is a license to damage or destroy a European protected species place of rest, or to disturb a European protected species. So there's a number of European protected species. They're not called that anymore. They're just called protected species, or British protected species, I think, because it's just changed in the last couple of weeks. So that includes all species of bats, otters, dormice, great crested newt. So hence the need for survey licenses for those particular protected species. And then if you want to do a development, so say you want to convert a barn that's actually a bat roost, you would need to have a license to disturb the bats and to damage or destroy the roost, but also the license would be the license would also have to cover making sure that no bats were killed, making sure the works are done when the bats are not there, and making sure that the bats can still live there after the development. So you have to put in a step-by-step process on what to do, and that's something you start to get involved in. You need to have your bat license before you can start doing that, or your your protected species license, and it's something you do when you're an ecologist or senior ecologist. And BREEAM, I'm not even sure what that stands for, but it's to do with sustainable homes and making sure that housing developments have extra biodiversity after the site has been completed than it had before. So it's a process. There's another one called Code for Sustainable Homes, and there's a new one called Biodiversity Net Gain. So the idea is that that you actually try and make the biodiversity better after the development than it was before. And sometimes you have to do that off-site, but you try and do it on-site if you can. And then Jenny's asking, is COVID likely to have an impact on getting experience for licenses? Well, my students last year that were on certificate, all of them managed to get survey experience. So it's more difficult, but it's not totally not happening. Because developments need to go ahead, people are allowed to go to work as long as it's necessary, if you see what I mean, and you're taking the precautions that you need to take. So typically, instead of sharing lifts, for example, you might have to drive to the site in separate cars and wear masks and be socially distanced and that sort of thing. There's no reason why you can't be doing surveys. And a lot of consultancies are just as busy as they are any other year. Okay, so don't let that put you off. I think the only things that are happening less are the groups, like the bat group and the mammal groups and things like that, because they're just thinking, oh no, we can't really do anything. But the consultancies are actually working just as much. Okay, so I've just given you this little overview of the career planner, and I hope that was useful. Can you see how it's a good idea to kind of start off with, the assumption that you can do this, to just outline where you're at, because it's really, really good to see you reaching the milestones as you work through your plan, and then to just make a plan and, with the end in mind. So keeping the end in mind, this is where I'm going, this is where I've started from, and you can see how it will progress by just doing different things every year and building your skills up. For those of you that weren't on my last webinar, which is about career motivation, I did talk about my annual plan. So I'll just show you on my diary, and I know it's not very easy to see because I'm only a tiny little thumbnail, but basically this is my annual plan. So this is what I want to achieve this year. Oh, hang on, let's get the light on it. So I've got the year there, and I've got different headings all around here, and each one has a few points on it. Okay, so for example, I've got some health goals. Actually, my goal by the end of the year is a certain weight, and I am 1 pound off that already. So I've nearly achieved it in the first month, which I'm really pleased about. I've got travel achievements, I've got my career goals, I've got investment goals, I've got fun goals, so sort of some things that I want to do for fun. So for example, I've just started learning to play the piano, and yeah, I'm getting, it's quite good actually. I'm getting on with it really well. So that's what I want to achieve in the year, and it's just an overview of that. And then at the beginning of every quarter, I'll do a little plan based on my annual plan, but what am I going to do this quarter? So I'll do a quarterly plan. So this is your 90-day plan here, and you'll just say to yourself, right, I'm going to set myself these targets under these different headings. So it might be, say, if you want to do it as career and life, I would definitely add in life as well, because there's more to life than going to work all the time. But you could have several headings within your career goals, like your bat experience or learning plants or something like that, and start making some little goals for your 3-month plan. And then you need to, obviously with ecology, you need to base it on what the seasons are going to be like. So if your next 3 months is actually in the winter and there's no surveys going on, you might want to be doing some online courses or some reading or something to, you know, get you up to speed with things before the survey season starts. Or it might be writing to local consultancies to get some experience and making contact with them and that sort of thing. And then I've actually got, on the 1st of the month, I do a plan for the month. So this is all the things that I want to achieve in the month. And so every day I have a page a day diary. So every day I will look at my January plan and I will say, right, I still haven't done that yet. I better do that. And I'll write my to-do list on my daily page and get little things done. So the to-do list is actually things that take less than an hour. Okay, so they might take a few minutes or they'll take up to an hour. And if they're going to take more than an hour, then chunk them down into smaller chunks. Okay, so if it's, say, what have I got here? I'm trying to see if I've got something that's more than an hour. Well, let's say, I don't know, think of something that's going to take more than, obviously your bat license is going to take more than an hour, isn't it? So you might chunk that down into join the bat group, and then the next day or the next week you might say, I'm going to download the bat workers manual. I'm going to read a chapter of the bat workers manual. I'm going to, you know, whatever, and just like chunk it down into little chunks. So, you know, if you set for the month that you want to read the bat workers manual, you'd actually then diarize every little bit of it and take it down to sort of an hour chunks at the most, or a few minutes to an hour at the most. And then you'll find that you actually get loads done by doing that. So yeah, I think I've covered everything I was going to cover. So making your goals is basically getting the right skills in place, and I've gone through the key skills, including driving and botany, as well as your phase 1 surveying for protected species and PEAs and report writing. I've talked about the big 3, so you've got your bats, great crested newts and dormice, so thinking about working towards those licenses. And I've also talked about using a career planner like this one here, and I will make that available on the website under the webinar section, so that you can actually start chunking it down and making a bit of a plan. Remember to set the date, so make sure that you put a date here. So 90 days, it'll say, let's say you're going to start this on the 1st of February, so 90 days would be 1st of March, 1st of May or whatever. It will be your 3-month plan. Okay. Yeah, so do make use of this thing. Have a look at this one here. That's kind of a suggested path. And the other thing, if you haven't already read my book on how to become an ecological consultant, so here it is. You can get it on Amazon, and you can also get it from the website as a PDF, and it has the planner actually in the back as an appendix, and it also has this template of the life planner filled out there. And it also has an example of a quarterly action plan. So it will be something, so I'll list some of the things you could do in a quarter, and then you write down the time that it takes to complete it as well. So a quarterly plan, it will be list skills need to get to assistant ecologist. That will take 45 minutes. Order the tree book and the flowering plant ID book. That will take 20 minutes. List 20 trees to learn. Start a notebook or a scrapbook for pressed leaves and notes. That will take 40 minutes. Get a list of British plants, choose 3 families and start learning daily. That will take an hour. Book the phase 1 training course. That will take 30 minutes. Order the phase 1 handbook. That will take 20 minutes. So can you see how in a quarter you've got like maybe 5 hours of activity, which you could easily fit around a full-time job, but you're getting things done. Read the phase 1 handbook, put reading time into the weekly diary, join your local back group. So it's like little actions that you can take and how long they're going to take. It's just a really good way of getting a lot done. Okay. So I'm just going to stop sharing my screen, and we've just got a couple of minutes at the end. Has anybody got any burning questions? Did you do a webinar on the 25th on doing separate modules for the certificate? If so, will you be doing a rerun link on the webinar page? I can do. I wasn't going to, but I will. Yeah, okay. Yeah, I did a webinar on Tuesday, and that was about the modular course on certificate. So we're now doing the certificate in ecological consultancy, and we're doing 2 intakes, one in March and one in April, and then we're doing another intake in March for a modular course, which is where the certificate course, which is a complete training for becoming an ecological consultant. There's lots of details on the website about that, but basically if you want to get your training done, then just do that. And we've got obviously Laura has done it, and Neil. Did Neil do it? Did you do it? Oh, Neil, I can't remember. We've got several people that are booked on it this year as well. So it's basically you do the core skills week, you do a field course, so you learn the field skills of phase 1 and looking at badger sets and otter spraints and things like that, and assessing trees for bats and site assessment and stuff like that. You also do 3 assignments, you do 3 optional courses, so you'll choose either beginner's botany if you're rubbish at botany, and a couple of other courses like maybe dormice or bats or something like that. So you have three courses included, and then you've got a load of tutorials, and you've got assignments including report writing and phase 1s and planning surveys and all of those sorts of things. So by the time you come out of that course, you've actually done a complete training, and this training was my master's course, basically the one that actually got me from being not an ecologist to being an ecologist. And I did vow that I would teach that course when I was most experienced or experienced enough to do it. So I do say that this is a real alternative to a master's degree, because it actually is my master's degree, but it's a lot cheaper. I mean, back 20 years ago, it cost me £5,000. I think it would probably cost more like 15 grand now to do it. So I think, you know, it is a much cheaper way of getting your training, and it's a very, very thorough course. So Laura, you've mentioned a couple of times already that you've done the course and you found it very helpful. Do you want to say anything else about it?
Yeah, because I really enjoyed being on the course, and it's a kickstart for my career, and also changed my thinking, and to be honest, it just prepared me and gave all the knowledge and skills I need to have, and also I know what I did not know, and I want and what else I need to achieve. So basically, it's everything here. You get the basics, and then you have to build on it, and learn more and more. But that's what you need.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Yeah, so it is a really excellent course. Obviously, I would say that, wouldn't I? But I've put nearly 400 people through it now. I've been doing it for 12 years, and I think it's the best training that is available now to become an ecological consultant. So do consider doing it. If you haven't got a relevant degree, you need to get in touch with me and just say, I've been doing this. Can I get into the certificate? And if not, I can do a bespoke training program for you anyway that will get you on your path. So definitely consider that. We've got the intake is on the 15th to the 19th of March, and it's basically once you've done all the modules, including an exam and an invasive species course and a whole load of other things, once you've done all the modules, then you can graduate and you get your certificate in ecological consultancy. And it does really make you much more employable, because you've got a whole set of real skills and real knowledge that you can take to interviews and things like that. And everybody that's been applying, I mean, I've got several people now on last year's course that have managed to get jobs this year as well. And one girl's just been offered 2 jobs and she can't decide which one to go for and things like that. So it really gives you a lot of confidence to move forward with your career. And if you're sort of at the beginning of your journey, then I definitely recommend the book, How to Become an Ecological Consultant. Look out for the green cover. This one is the 3rd edition that's been updated. And that will give you all the steps that you need to put in place, and that can help you put your plan together as well. So if anybody wants to do their plan and send it over to me and say, is this feasible, Sue? And let me know, sort of, if I don't know you very well, what you've done so far and what you're up to and where you want to go, then I can have a quick look at it for you as well, if you want to do that. Okay, I'm going to stop the webinar now. I'm going to put this up on the website under the webinar page where you found the link to this in the first place. So if you want to watch it again, you're very welcome. And I hope you found it useful. The next webinar is on the 18th of February, which is also a Thursday, and it's called How to Get Experience in Ecology. So I'm going to be talking about how to actually get all that experience. I've obviously talked about quite a bit of it today, but I've got lots of tips on how you can get your experience. So thank you very much for joining me this evening, and I hope to see you again. Just also to let you know, I've got a Facebook page and a Instagram account. So on the Instagram, we're putting out the dates of all the webinars. Also, if you're not on our mailing list, so if you heard about this on the mailing list, then you're on the mailing list, if you see what I mean, if you get our newsletter. But if you're not on the mailing list, then email us on Ecology Training UK @gmail.com and get yourself on the mailing list, and you'll hear about all these webinars that are going to happen. And I think it's really good to get involved in these webinars. It's quite new for me, webinars last year when we suddenly got thrown into lockdown, and I think it's just a really nice way to connect with people, particularly while we're all in lockdown, to sort of get you motivated and make you feel like you're part of something. So thank you so much for joining me tonight, and I'll see you again soon. Thank you. Bye.